A little bit of background. I, 23 and female, was 20 at the time this happened. I moved in with my uncle in San Antonio, Texas, with the agreement that I didn't have to pay rent as long as I helped him out with chores and my cousins. I got a job at a super well-known coffee chain downtown, close to the touristy part of the area. We had a lot of regulars, and a lot of homeless coming in and out as well. I felt relatively safe though, because I got to know the people there, and it was almost always a lot of foot traffic around as well. I used to even take walks after work in the area, especially since I was super close to the Riverwalk. Skipped to a couple months into the job and I was pretty much friends with everyone I worked with. We were all super close. On this particular day, it was one of my coworkers' last days there. There were about 3 guys who had been in there almost all morning. They hadn't bought anything and were just hanging out. It wasn't too unusual for my location. On my break, I decided to walk down to a nearby drugstore so I could get a farewell card and maybe also a small gift for said coworker. I walked out and put my earphones in. Before I could even press play, I heard the door open up behind me and footsteps following behind. Whoever it was caught up to me and started walking alongside me, matching my pace exactly. I turned to look. It was one of those guys that had been there all morning. He was a bit taller than me and reminded me a lot of Lakeith Stanfield. He tried to ask for my number. I kindly told him no. He persisted and I, with a short temper, kinda told him to fuck off. He stopped and stared at me in surprise, as I don't look like someone who speaks up or would be rude. He just stood there and watched as I walked away, and by the time I went back, they were already gone. I proceeded to tell my coworkers about the encounter, and we all laughed it off together. I thought that would be the end of it. Of course, I was wrong. Every single shift after that, he would already be there just hanging out, or would walk in mid-shift, sometimes with somebody else and sometimes by himself. I just assumed he was another homeless person, due to how he was pretty much always able to be around. My shifts were sporadic as well. Some days I opened, some days I closed, sometimes I worked mid, but it didn't matter when I worked. He was always there. At that point, I started feeling a bit paranoid. I would always catch him staring in my direction. He would never order anything either, never talk to me, wouldn't follow me either. He would just sit there for hours watching me. I started mentioning it to my coworkers, and they started noticing it too. One of my team leaders would help me out by sending me to wash dishes in the back or organize the cooler. My coworkers would also try and place themselves to try and block me from his view. I started feeling very uncomfortable at work. Sometimes when I closed, a coworker would walk me to my car before heading home themselves, or if I didn't close, they would walk me to my car and turn around and head back to work. Suddenly, one day he was just staring same as usual. I was working the register that day. When he walked up and ordered a water, I asked for his name for his order. I now had his first name just in case. He took his water and went and sat back down. I had mentioned him before to my manager, but because he hadn't really done anything yet, we couldn't do anything beside note it in the manager book. The next day, I worked with my manager. It was him, 2 other coworkers, and me. I told them I had to go to the bathroom real quick. There were 2 bathrooms right next to each other, but sort of hidden from the coffee bar and register. They weren't gender specific either. I walked around the bar to the lobby area. I had to pass his table and walk down the lobby to get to the bathrooms. I noticed him getting up just as I went inside. I sat down to do my business when someone began to rattle the knob. I shouted that it was occupied, but whoever it was kept rattling the door until I was finished. When I finally opened the door, no one was there, but I did notice him walking back and adjusting his chair. I was super freaked out and told my boss. He couldn't tell him anything because we had no direct proof it was him. Later that shift, he got up and picked up a coffee from the pickup area. My boss assumed he had ordered it and let him take it. I told him it wasn't, and it wasn't even his real name. My boss used this as an opportunity to tell him if he did something like that again, he would never be allowed to come back. The man apologized profusely, and after that he actually stuck to the rules very strictly. He went back to just watching me. Cut to Valentine's Day. One of my team leaders and I would be scheduled to work certain Thursdays after close to deep clean the store. We would stay until 1 a.m. This happened to be one of those Thursdays. We were almost done, and I just had to clean the bathrooms as one of the last chores. I finished, and as I walked out of the bathroom, I saw him peeking in with both his hands pressed against the window, eyes wide, just staring at me with this super intense look. I froze for a second, just staring back. I noticed on one of his palms, pressed against the window, a purple foam heart. He didn't move at all. I freaked out and went back into the bathroom. I shouted, "Hannah! Hannah, he's here! He's back!" She barely hears me through the music we were blasting. Hannah was the team lead who would help hide me from him, so she knew the huge fear I had towards him. She walked towards the bathroom shouting back, "What are you saying? What's going on?" As soon as she tried to approach though, she saw him staring through the window. I told her again, "He's here. He's watching me." She started shouting through the window, "You need to leave. If you don't leave, we're calling the police right now." I stepped out a little to see if he'd leave on his own. Instead, he was ignoring her, and his eyes were fixated on me. I stepped back into the bathroom, and my lead continued to shout at him to leave. About 5 minutes passed when he realized I was not stepping out of that bathroom again until he left, so finally he gave up. The next day, my lead and I told my manager I wanted to file a police report. He told me to wait until he talked to his boss. He showed up again that day, but I was only there to talk to my manager and leave right after. When I got home, a friend convinced me to call the cops. I texted my boss that I didn't care what he or his boss said. I was scared and I was going to file a report. I dialed 911 and told them a summarized version. They told me they were going to send someone to where I live to take the official report. The 2 officers were very nice and super supportive. I told them my whole story and how my boss didn't feel the need to get cops involved since I hadn't been harmed yet. The officers told me I should have called them right away and defended me, saying they could get him for harassment. I thanked them, and they told me if he showed up to dial 911 so they could take him in for trespassing and harassing. I think that day my manager banned him and warned him because he never showed up to the coffee shop again. A few months later, when I was comfortable again with downtown, I went out with some friends to walk around. We were close to where I worked. As we rounded a corner, I saw him. I ducked into a little corner store, and my friends followed behind. I told them I'd seen him, and they kept an eye out. Once he was out of view, we left the store, and thankfully, that was the last time I saw him. I live in a small condominium in a very quiet area in one of the biggest cities in France. My apartment is on the ground floor, at the very end of the building. In short, no one has to pass in front of my place because to access the upper floors, it's done at the other end through the parking lot. However, at the very back of the residence, there's a common garden through which it's possible to access all floors. It's stupid. The path is longer and very muddy, but as it's possible, many newcomers use this path. I get along very well with 4 of my neighbors. We actually talk every day for several hours, to say the least. I have to take my dog out several times a day, and they usually keep me company. Now they even protect me. On October 18th, my neighbor confided to me to have seen someone passing in front of her window. As she's in the apartment before mine, the man would thus have passed at my place to reach the floors, so he passed on my ground as well. I don't want people I don't know to cross my property. It's my yard and it excites my dog as well. She just barks and disturbs the whole neighborhood. On October 20th, the man passed by my house while I was taking the dog out in the common garden with my neighbors. I kindly asked the man to not pass this way anymore and reminded him the proper way to reach the floors after he asked me if my dog was dangerous. He started screaming, arms in the air, looked like an angry bear sort of. Horrific. He seemed crazy, and he yelled at me that he would send my dog to the shelter, that he could do whatever he wanted to, that he knew the common rules. After yelling 1 or 2 minutes, he left, mumbling to himself. We were upset, but we never thought he would try to get revenge. Here's the list with the days of all the surprises that he served me, even though at the time we had no proof the actions were his. October 23rd, theft of 2 pairs of shoes I left outside. October 25th, my car was scratched and a tire deflated intentionally. October 28th, the theft of 4 of my garden chairs, my last pair of outdoor shoes, and stealing my doormat. October 29th, 2 intentionally deflated tires. And October 30th, the destruction of my mailbox lock, destruction of the padlock of my parking gate, and an attempt to destroy the lock on my front door. From that point on, I was terrified. Would I have to go back to live with my parents? I was afraid for my dog as well. She was everything to me and had saved my life so many times. I filed a complaint with the police, and I didn't want to play his game. On October 30th, we installed a small camera, hidden in a plastic flower pot and dead leaves on my land between some bushes. We waited for one thing, to see him come back, to have proof for the police to identify clearly the man who was doing this. He had a very peculiar style. Maybe I could get my stuff back, if he hadn't already ruined it. And damn, those cameras were effective. It took several days before our camera, Eve, was filming more than just stray cats. Meanwhile, I was terrified at home, wondering if he was going to smash my car or try and poison my dog or something. I started to have panic attacks at work. Since I was late a couple of mornings when my tires were deflated, I also had to endure stupid remarks from my boss. It was just a lot of anxiety. On November 4th, Eve filmed the guy stealing 2 pairs of shoes I had left behind to lure him in. At that night, at 1 o'clock in the morning, he knocked over my ashtray all over my front porch. I got him. Fuck yeah! I was ecstatic. I could prove this was the same man who verbally abused me and was now fucking with my stuff. I immediately notified my neighbors, and in the morning, as she left for work, my neighbor saw him in the parking lot and took a picture of him. I can even compare it to the videos, so I can 100% prove it was him. I wouldn't let him hurt me or my baby. I went to the police this morning to show them the videos and make a joint complaint. Yesterday, Eve filmed him trying to break into my house. I'm afraid to be home alone. I don't sleep at night anymore. I'm afraid to leave my dog at the house alone. I think I'm going to move, even though I was perfectly fine in this apartment. My mom wants me to get a lawyer, but I'm afraid of retaliation. This happened to me in 1970, when I was 11 and a half years old. My 2 brothers and I have always had to walk to and from grade school each day for 8 years, since they didn't have a bus for our area. This was quite a distance away, and there's no way in current times there wouldn't have been a bus for our grade school days. We were the last house on the right in a very small subdivision on a dead-end street. Next to us was this ginormous cornfield with an old barn, a house, and a lot of acres of fruit trees and woods. As a shortcut, I would take this deserted woods trail and follow it to what will lead me to my house after about 15 minutes. This particular day, I turned right into the woods and the trail, as I had done every day, every year for 6 years by this point. It was the end of winter, and I still had my long blue winter coat on. I'd walked about 5 minutes on the trail, and for some reason, I just happened to glance behind me. quite some distance away, I could see a man enter the woods on the same trail I was. No one else was around, and for some reason, I started walking faster. I tried to tell myself I was just being silly. When I looked behind me, though, I saw the man had also begun to pick up his pace. This scared me, and I started walking really fast. I saw he had increased his speed to match with me when I again glanced over my shoulder. I still don't know why, but that day I felt so much fear I began running. I noticed he too began running as well. I was really afraid and no longer had the time to glance behind me. I broke into a full run as fast as I could until I came out on the road in front of my house. Normally, I walk the trail a bit further and end up at our garage and back door, but that day I sprinted into where our little street on the dead end began, and that brought me right in front of our house. I didn't want him to know exactly which house I lived in, so at that point I stopped to catch my breath. He was maybe only 10 to 15 seconds behind me. He finally caught up with me, but he didn't stop. He slowed to a much slower pace, looked at me and smiled, and said, "You're a fast runner." Then he took off running again. I stayed where I was until I couldn't see him anymore, and then I turned into our driveway. For months after that, I would take a different way home, and did not walk those trails again for some time. I don't know if I was just being paranoid, but why else would a young man begin running after me for a good 10 minutes like that? He scared the shit out of me. It was a good thing I was indeed a very fast runner. I don't know what might have occurred on that deserted woods trail. I was working at my first ever job in retail. I was around 20 years old. It was a busy morning, 9 a.m., somewhere mid-December or so, hence why it was so busy. I was working the checkouts as per usual, scanning items, ringing up customers, all that jazz. It was about an hour into my shift. I was serving this elderly man who bought just a handful of items. After giving him his subtotal, another guy behind him, smelling of booze, stretched out handing me cash. I kindly told him I wasn't serving him, I was serving the man in front of him. Then I looked down and saw he was buying some cheap knockoff branded Baileys, some booze, and of course, I figured this guy was wasted. Just as I was taking payment from the elderly man, I was planning in my head how on earth I was going to tell the next guy I could not sell him alcohol, as he was already far past drunk. This was my first job, so I had never encountered this sort of thing before. I finished serving the old man and moved on to the drunk guy. I looked around in hopes to find another colleague or maybe even my manager, but no one in sight was available to help. I looked at the man. Just before I opened my mouth, I felt like someone grabbed a fistful of my hair and something sharp poked me in the back. A man whispered in my ear, to which I also smelt alcohol on his breath. "Serve my mate." He pushed what I'm assuming was a knife harder into my back. "Now!" In complete shock, I said nothing. I just scanned the bottle, took the cash, and suddenly they were gone. I quickly turned around to my colleague working checkouts behind me, but all they did was look at me and ask if I was okay, completely unaware what just happened. I went for my break after this. I saw my manager pass by, so I rushed over to him and told him what just happened. All he did was laugh because he thought I was joking. He criticized me for selling alcohol to someone under the influence. Whatever that sharp object that was on my back was, it cut me. Before my break, I could feel blood running down my back, and I was very sore as well. Of course, the others couldn't see the blood as my uniform was black. I screamed to myself, "It's true, it did happen!" I turned around and lifted my hair, as I have very long hair. "Lift up my shirt or get my female colleague to do it. This guy fucking sliced me, look!" But the manager just said, "Ew, no, I don't want to see you lift up your shirt." He walked away, staring at his phone. Well, I did not return to finish my shift. I snuck out of the store, took a taxi, and went home. My mom cleaned up my back and dressed it. Then the next morning she called work to tell them I would not be returning. She listed the manager's incompetence to take action when I could have almost been stabbed over a bottle as the reason. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the content of this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide you like my content enough to subscribe, please be sure to hit the bell button right next to the subscribe button and turn notifications to all so you can be notified of every video I post in the future. If you don't feel like doing that though, I post a video nearly every day, so you can just come back every now and then and check up on what you missed. If you guys have any criticisms on what I can do better or any feedback on the stories in the video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I always enjoy reading all the comments and I try to give them hearts and respond when I can. If you guys would like to reach me for any reason, or you would like to send in a story to be read, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You'll find a link to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Last but not least, I also run two other channels, Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour, where I do true crime videos and dark documentaries respectively. If that kind of content sounds interesting to you, why not go ahead and check it out and see if it is for you. Aside from that though, guys, I think that's pretty much it for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.